G'day and welcome back to Derriere Farms with me, Farmer Jay. Today we continue, we're almost wrapped up our deep dive into precision farming. Now I know most other people have already finished theirs, but as I promised I was going to do a very detailed analysis of everything. So today we're going to look at harvest time, or harvesting our fields, and specifically how harvesting ties everything together in terms of the big picture. It gives us our economic analysis, it gives us our crop yields, it ties together our environmental score, especially for fields that we have done nothing yet with. They were left over from the previous save game before I installed precision farming. And then finally, we're going to look at what harvesting does for nitrogen and what's left over after harvest time. Now, in terms of our environmental score and fields that we haven't done anything yet with, like field 36, field 38, 34, and 31. They're still growing crops, like I said, from before I installed precision farming. So they're in a neutral state. The game doesn't know what to do with them or the information provided. Doesn't know how, for some reason it's not recognizing the fact that we put down some herbicide, some fertilizer, some lime, and it doesn't know what tillage we did yet. And that actually won't get updated till the spring when we go to plant our crops. But the top two bars will, and everything else. So what it's telling us so far is it recognizes that it's a field with 0 weeds, but it doesn't know how it got 0 weeds. And it tells us that a soil sample has been taken for that field. Well, obviously it does if we've got information. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to harvest the fields, and then we're going to look at all the information we talked about. There's no point going into it right now till we have all of our information together. While I remember, for those following along with the series, you'll know we found a bug in the weed control series where See and Spray gives us our maximum 30 points towards our environmental score, but it also gives us a 10% yield penalty. So I filed a bug report with Giants saying, why am I getting a yield penalty when See and Spray technology is supposed to boost your yield? And basically the response I got was, it's working as intended. Once you have weeds in the field, like depending on the size they are, you will take a yield penalty. And then they closed my ticket, so I couldn't respond. Problem is, if you direct drill, you're going to get large weeds right away, unlike in real life where they'll grow gradually. So you can take care of them at the beginning with the See and Spray technology and not suffer a penalty. But the game's not accounting for that. So what I did was, which field was it? This field. I used a weeder. As you can see, I didn't get my maximum penalty for weed control, but I still got a field average of 92%. So it's kind of a trade-off. Do you want the 10% bonus yield, or do you want to use a weeder or a hoe and take care of the weeds that way? I will cover that again in, like I said, if you look at the video, it's the weed control video where we discover the bug. So I just wanted to make you guys aware that for those of you, like I said, that did watch that video, I wanted to make you aware that Giant says, quote unquote, working as intended. I say it's a bug, they say it's not. Alright guys, before I go any further, I just want to address some weird things that are popping up that I don't know if are working as intended or not, like the weed issue. But I will be digging into them further and making a video on them and how to deal with it. So make sure you're subscribed and have the notification bell turned on so you know when that video comes out, if you want to know how to get the perfect score. An example is this. I have noticed that certain combines and certain combine headers leave behind small strips of crop. It's not every combine and every combine header, and it's not necessarily modded combines that's doing it. It's some of the combines that are in the base game as well. So I want to figure out what's causing it. I think it's probably this same thing that's causing weird nitrogen levels, but I'm not 100% sure. Anyway, stay tuned for that. Okay, so now let's dig into the meat and potatoes of what we were going to look at. So, this field's been harvested. That field's been harvested, but we already had that field harvested. It's been through one cycle. Let's bring up our environmental score. So it's still at 97%. Something's holding that field back by 3 points. This field's gone from 72 to 94. What's holding this field back is the tillage, because, again, the game doesn't know how it was tilled the first time. So we don't get any points. It's still in a neutral state. Same as this field is in a neutral state for tillage, but it's updated since we harvested. It's updated our nitrogen and pH levels going from 72 to 93. I think 93 is still a pretty good score. Now the oddity here is this field, which is field 68. It was in a completely neutral state when I first, well, let's take a look at it. When I first got to it, it had 0 nitrogen, and I planted soybeans based on the fact that in Farming Simulator 19, soybeans added nitrogen to the ground, and therefore I assumed when it got harvested that the fact that there was nitrogen added to the ground would register. Again, speaking of oddities, but I found out that nitrogen is not added in this version of Farming Simulator or Precision Farming through the crops. It's added through harvesting. So when the harvester went through this field, it registered 0 nitrogen. Therefore, we got a 0 nitrogen score, but it left behind 45 kilograms per hectare of nitrogen. And as you can see, it's fairly uniform across the board, with a little bit of an exception. Here, field 40, it's slightly different. What do these red lines mean? And why are they weird compared to something, well, that I'm going to look into, because that field's been limed in nitrogen, so I don't know why it's got lines. But this one's the one we want to take a look at. and I'm going to explain to you why it's different. So looking at the field that had soybeans in it, you can see that the what do I want to call it? Well, even easier, let's look at this field that had barley in it. You can see that the chopped straw is pretty much uniform across the ground. And therefore, in this field, we don't have weird lines. Well, we kind of got one, but it's not a major point. So let's go and take a look at this field. You can see here that the lines correspond. This is where the chopped straw got dropped, and this is where it didn't, and it only left behind 15 kilograms per hectare of nitrogen, whereas in these lines here it's 40 kilograms per hectare. Now, I talked a little bit with a couple of other people about this, and they had pointed out these lines, so I dug into it a little bit further. These lines depend on the combine you use. The combine I used on this field had a 40-foot header, but it's only dropping about 10 foot, let's say 10 foot on either side of no chaff, no chopped straw, and probably the other half is in the middle where it's leaving it. This is combine specific. It's got nothing to do with a header or not. It's got to do with the combine you're using and how it's set up to distribute straw, or chaff, I should say, from the straw. See right here, where nothing got dropped, we're at 20, but pretty much right across the rest of the field where it was uniformly dropped, it's 45 kilograms a hectare. So if you want to maximize your leftover nitrogen from chopped straw, make sure you use a combine that leaves behind a wide swath of chopped straw as opposed to a narrower one. This field still annoys me. Like I said, if I knew that a base 0 nitrogen level would register as a huge negative, I would have planted a different crop in here. Now, I have planted soybeans in this field, and this already had a crop in it, so it already had a nitrogen level. It might only be 10 to 15 kilograms per hectare, but it should be enough to keep me from getting that huge negative. Make sense so far? Oh, and you only get a 0 nitrogen level on various types of soil. If this had been a different type of soil, I would have started off with a different base of nitrogen. Okay, so we've covered the nitrogen, we've covered our environmental score. Let's answer the question before I go any further, while we're still on the topic of nitrogen, as to whether or not you should, let's go back to this field, whether or not you should bale and sell your straw, or whether you should chop it. My gut tells me you should because it's giving us 45 out over 20 kilograms. So we're getting 25 to 40 to 45. So we're getting anywhere from 15 to 20 kilograms per hectare of bonus nitrogen. Now, nitrogen's not cheap. Fertilizer's not cheap. And the price of straw, even right now in December when the prices are good, the price of straw is $144 per 1,000 liters. That could almost be a video on itself, is what does it cost to fertilize this field versus what does it cost to, or what profit does one make from baling straw. Now, obviously, if you're on a dairy farm or you've got a pig farm, you want to harvest a certain amount of straw for your animals. So that, in that case, that becomes a moot point. Because you get much more nitrogen out of manure than you do out of chopped straw, and manure is free. So yeah, that's where I'm thinking you justify baling the straw over taking the boost in nitrogen. But like I said, I like to be thorough, so I'm going to look into that further in another video. So that brings us to our crop yield, or our yield analysis. Yield, as you can see, was high here, 120%, or maybe 125%. And it was a little bit lower there, and much lower up here. Let's take a look at the soil types, and you'll see how it corresponds. Silty clay, which is one of the worst. That's why we had such a low yield here. And sandy, well, loam and sandy loam down there, which is why we had the best and then a better crop yield. Same with this field. See how the lines pretty much parallel the yield. All right, and this brings us to, let me get out of this screen, and this brings us to our crop analysis. So let's go back just to our EV score so we can bring this up. So our economic analysis for this field says we spent, and I didn't realize how expensive it was until I looked at this, but we spent $13,125 on 150 soil samples. That's close to, well, that's $87 per soil sample. That's a lot of money for something you can do for, well, pretty much very cheaply by driving around and taking soil samples yourself. However, it takes a long time. So it depends on what your time is worth. For me, I would say we're justified with the 13,000. Now, next it says I spent $12,345 on 54,000 liters of lime. And I spent 8,153 liters of mineral fertilizer or solid fertilizer, and it cost me $13,045. So fertilizer is obviously a lot more expensive than lime. Tells me how much fuel I spent on the field so far. what the maintenance costs were on all the equipment that I used to fertilize, harvest, and mulch the field, as well as what I paid my workers for this field. Then it goes into the yield. I got essentially 250,000 liters of sorghum. And I made $107,077, which means my costs were $7,165, which I don't understand. I mean, if I spent, my cost. Sorry, I'm looking at the increase. My costs were $42,016. My total earnings were $107,077, which means this field brought in a total profit of $65,061. Following me so far? Now here's the interesting part. Remember, $65,000 income. I haven't actually sold my sorghum yet. It is sitting... Where is it sitting? It's sitting right here at... Oh, okay. Oh, I know what I did. Well, okay, so we have 173,000 liters out of our 259. I forgot I dumped a trailer load at the railroad station. But let's take this through the sell point, and we're in December, and the field was harvested in December. I'm going to have to pull forward so when I tip, I don't hit the roof. Okay, so $65,000 is what it's telling me my income was off the field. Let's dump this right now. So I made $154,000 so far, and I haven't sold everything yet. 154, 165. So that's 300,000. Right? 160. So I made a lot more money than $65,000. So where are they getting that number from? I don't know. The same as this field here, which was oats, and I've made $19,000 off this field. Total earnings, $9,000 in costs, $28,000 in earnings. Let's go over, and we will see at this sales point what, and we'll just do it for the oats. I know I have oats and soybeans in this trailer, but we'll just sell the oats and we'll see what our total income for the oats is. Let's dump the oats. And we won't even look at the bonus we get for our environmental score. We'll just look at the base amount. So we got $45,000 in harvest income, plus another $5,000. So $45,000. And where is our total income or total earnings is $28,000. Where are they getting these numbers from? Because they don't add up. We just proved that we made $45,000 instead of $28,000. And it was harvested in the same month, in December, so it's not as though prices have changed. They are not using the score or the price from the sell points. They're using some other random arbitrary sell point price. And I don't know where they're getting that number from. So I just wanted to let you guys know that your economic analysis screen may be in question. Okay, the mineral fertilizer makes sense because we use just over 2,000 liters, and 1,000 liters costs us 1,800, and this says we used 3,663. So, yeah, that pretty much that makes sense. Seeds. It seems a little pricey, but I'd have to do the math. It's the total. It's the yield that's really bothering me. Like we said, we made a lot more than 28,000 from. Well, this is our second crop, so we made a lot more just off our second crop than it's showing for 2 harvests combined. The only thing I can think of is that it is using the average low price, the lowest price you'd get in the year, not necessarily the highest, so the lowest price you would get in a year for that crop. Okay, so taking the lowest price we have, which is $13.74 in the past year for oats, and we multiply it by the 30,000 liters we just sold, it should still give us a total earnings of $41,000, which is a lot more than $28,924. So I don't know what number they're using for the yield to get the profit and loss. The loss statements make sense. The profit doesn't. So be careful when you're looking at your total score. My gut is telling me that this is actually based on either medium or hard mode difficulty, and for some reason they haven't programmed in the change based on the price of the economic difficulty. We're on easy mode just to get things done. Now, the other thing you can do with your economic analysis screen, and this is kind of important if you want to keep track of your expenses, is you can hit reset. Everything goes back to normal. So it will show us what our costs are when we mulch, roll, seed, and so on. Or we can go back to the totals for the entire field throughout time, or we can go back to the total values. It's kind of handy to have the two options because you can see what you're making per crop. If you plant, let's say, barley in here, or let's even say canola, which is a high price product. But just be careful because your yield and your total earnings from that yield aren't necessarily reflective. As it stands, this is a much better way of keeping track of your costs than it is of your profits. Let me just park this bad boy here. Okay, so we covered our environmental score update, where our profit and loss statement comes from, or our economic analysis. Our yield based on soil is based on soil types, and we covered everything we meant to cover in this video. I hope you found it useful. Like I said, I will be going into more detail in other videos. One of the videos I want to look at, and I'm going to use this field to deal with it, is, does precision farming cover olives and grapes? And I also want to look at how precision farming is affected by production chains. So stay tuned for those videos. Thanks for watching. Take care. Jay.